Hi, I'm Patricia Shanks, and this is Studio Shanks Sundays live at 5. Keep watching. So I'm very pleased to have a special guest, a longtime friend today, Paul Karaitis. I said it right, right, Paul?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah. He's a wonderful tenor. I think of him as a Renaissance musician, a Renaissance person. What, so maybe you can speak to that. You do so many things. What all do you do?
Anything from concert and operatic to movie scores and video game scores.
Wonderful. Yeah, I see that you've done, and you're kind of humble. You're kind of low key. That's my impression of you. I don't know. Maybe you're wild and crazy other times, but I know that you've performed all over the world.
Yes.
And for whom have you performed?
Oh, anybody from small groups of interested arts supporters to I did the 10th annual Melbourne Arts International Festival down there in Australia a number of years ago.
And you've performed for several opera companies and ballet companies.
Yes.
And can you rattle off some of
Oh,
those
sure.
just to impress
Seattle
everyone?
Opera, Portland Opera, Eugene Opera, and Pacific Northwest Ballet, and Pittsburgh Ballet.
Wonderful. I know you're always traveling. It seems like I'm always seeing in social media that you're off here somewhere or another. And you said something interesting in the little information that you sent me recently, that you have your own version of something that you sang in Carmina Burana. Is that, what does that mean, your own version?
Basically, I don't just do what, to my ear, too many singers do, which is just because it's the same melody repeated three different times with different words. They just sing it like that, and then it's awfully boring. I do a whole, because if I'm just doing the tenor part, I do a whole production, as it were, starting with the first verse, very soft. The second one gets a little wilder, and then the third one is extremely over the top because it's, the only time that you're doing a solo in that piece as the tenor.
Right. Right. And you have the vocal range to be able to do all of that.
Yep.
I've heard some of your work, and your voice is just wonderful. You can hear it in a mix, should you want to hear it in mix, but you also sang the tenor and the baritone.
Yes, I have been doing that ever since getting out of college with smaller organizations. And then a number of years back, I think it was about like 2009, I heard that the symphony in Seattle was going to be doing the work again. And so I'd performed with Maestro Schwartz, who was the conductor at the time. And so I had to re-audition because since he was an instrumentalist, he never, even if he's worked with you for many, many years, he always forgets what your voice sounds like. So I went ahead and set up the audition and let his artistic administrator know that should the baritone, whoever they cast, suddenly, not be able to perform, I could jump in and do that too because I'd done it before. And she emails me back about an hour later going, all right, would you mind if you auditioned for the baritone as well? I'm going, sure, not a problem. So I get there into the hall, and it's just the maestro and his artistic administrator out there, way out there in the house, and me and my accompanist. And so, of course, I did Swan first because that was technically what the audition was for. And then I asked him, all right, what do you want to hear out of the baritone? And the older Jerry Schwartz gets, the more he sounds like literally William Shatner. He said, well, why don't you do the one where he sings about flesh and gold. And I'm going, flesh and gold. Oh, okay. And so I turned to my accompanist and said, yes, we're going to do this. So I do a verse out of that. And then I do a couple of verses out of some of the other ones. And he's bouncing around in his seat. After we get done with the last thing that he wanted to hear, he jumps out of his chair, runs up the stage, shakes my hand, says, yeah, it's going to be a great show, and leaves. And I'm going, okay, what just happened? And then I go home, and about maybe an hour later, the artistic administrator emails me again and says, yes, he wants you to do both the baritone and the tenor. So I'm going, great, wonderful, okay. And originally we were going to do just 2 performances on a Thursday night and a Saturday night. Of course, since Carmina is extremely popular, not only among the ballet mains, but just the people that like the work itself, I get a call about a week before the show from the artistic administrator saying, well, the ticket sales have been extremely robust, and so we're going to insert another performance on the Friday night. Would you mind that? And I'm going, no, that'll be fine, because I usually had a night off, but this was back-to-back, 3 in a row, all of the baritone and tenor stuff, which I had never done before. I'd always had at least an evening off, or maybe 2 evenings off. So we get to the first performance, went great. Second night was really good. And then the third night, I understood finally why so many baritones with whom I had performed it before, especially if it was their first time doing the baritone part, started basically sweating blood about 5 minutes before curtain, because it's a lot of work, even as somebody who, as I call myself, a vocal freak, can do, especially if you're doing all of the male solos. And so it was quite something. And I have a recording, private recording of each night of those performances, and I use that occasionally for auditions. And I'm very pleased with how it turned out. But it's like, wow, that was really quite a lot of work, 3 nights.
That is a tough role, and you see, you're a trooper. You do it all, and excuse me. And along the lines of doing it all, you're also a studio recording artist. You do a whole variety of things. What are some of the range of things that you do there?
Everything, as I said, from film scores to video game scores to other things. Like I've done some documentary type stuff, things that just came along where somebody basically who had worked with me before remembered me and said, oh, you'd be great for this. Would you be interested? And I'm going, where do I have to be and how soon do you want me? But my favorites are to do either the film or video game scores. And in some respects, it's a shame that video game scores basically get, as I say, covered up by all the screaming and explosions, because lately, like over the past 5 years, I have heard some of the most amazing and beautiful and complex music, which, because it's a video game, a lot of people don't pay attention to, because they're there just to do whatever the character's doing, whether it's a single person shooter or something else. And It's just like, wow, this stuff really needs to be done in concert. Like I'm very grateful. I've done now 2 different times I call a traveling road show of the Legend of Zelda has become a concert favorite, and so I've sung that in smaller groups because that's some really incredible music.
Yes, that was an early one too.
Yes,
I think
it was.
and quite popular. I know sometimes I had some students who wanted to do some of the piano things from that. So, yeah. And what are some of the other? What else can we hear you on? What other
Well,
video?
my favorite that basically I was amazed that I came through the sound mixing as much as I did, but again, of course, I've got the weird overtones, was in the first Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider film. That one we did twice, because as it turns out, after we had done it the first time, there was this split in the Sony Pictures board. Half the picture half the board did not want it to be released as a film. They just wanted it to go straight to video. The other half said, no, wait, we can save this if we recut this, this, and this, and this, and do that. And so, of course, because they did that, the music that the composer, who was an incredible guy, which I had never worked with before until then, the music he had already composed did not fit those reshot scenes. So he had to recompose stuff, and then we had to come back and re-record it.
And re-sing it.
The reason why I came out to my ears so much was most composers for all film and video scores and everything only use what we call 3 different passes. You do it, you record the same thing 3 different times, and then that gets mixed down. This composer prefers 4 different passes. So there are 4 different versions of me in that score. I was in New York to do an audition when it was the premiere week. And so I found out it was playing at a very nice theater near Times Square. I didn't have anything to do that afternoon. So I said, sure, I'll go hear the movie because I'd love to see what they did with it. Because it's got, I mean, among other things, it's got Peter Fonda playing the devil. It was wonderful. And so I'm sitting there about maybe 10, 15 rows back on the ground floor. I didn't want to sit up in the balcony. I wanted to see the whole thing, you know, a little closer. And the music starts and I'm just listening. I'm going, oh my God, I can hear myself. And it just kept going that way all the way through. I'm going, there I am again, there I am again. And so, you know, I was just sitting there weeping because I had never heard a film score where I could hear myself unless it was a solo. And so that was quite an experience.
Well, again, that's a testament to the quality of your voice and your technique and your longevity and ability to always, you know, carry off whatever the job is. When you were talking about miking, I was thinking the one thing with the overtones in an operatic voice, if you're working, doing other styles of music or on certain kinds of miking situations, you have to kind of learn how to dampen some of those overtones. Otherwise, it distorts.
Yep.
And I know I remember years ago reading something of you know, the well-known, the famous opera singer Placido Domingo came out of the zarzuela tradition. So he was doing sort of more contemporary, a la similar to musical theater types of stuff with his family early on. But someone said that he had a good miking technique. And I think that's probably because he was able to do all these different styles. He learned, you know, how to dampen some of that or allow those overtones to come in so that you could get that super duper ringing focused sound. So can you talk to how you achieve that sound or how you dampen it or anything about?
Well, basically I just go in and sing with the voice I have. And if things don't work out exactly the way either the composer or the recording engineers want, we can do things with positioning me differently with the microphone, or I can just, you know, back it way, way off until we get to something where they go, yeah, that's what we want. Years ago, I had a session where we were working with a particular recording engineer that I'd worked with quite a bit in the past. And it was a small group. It was only like about maybe 10 people plus myself, including myself. And we were getting ready to get set up. And the recording engineer says, oh yeah, your mic is going to be different. It's in the next room. And then he laughed but he was just basically telling me, don't screw things up. Don't sing too loud.
Yeah. Well, and I think people may be curious too, who don't know what the recording setup is like. Back in the day, of course, you'd have full orchestras in a huge room, and then you'd have the singers mic'd, and the mic might be quite a distance away because of that, and everything would be happening at once, which to me just sounds frightening because that means everything has to happen correctly, properly at once, because there's a lot of money involved in those orchestras and
yes.
Yeah, but
I've done sessions like that to where we are doing everything with the orchestra because that's the only time everybody can be put together in the same room. And yeah, it's stressful, especially if we've had some times where unfortunately what the composer writes is not exactly all that singable. Like we had something for a video game where the sopranos were singing 9 high E flats. That's an E flat at the top above the staff in a row. And we were only able to do, and the rest of that particular piece too was all extremely high for all voice parts. We were only able to do like about maybe a take and a half before our conductor, who was the one that set it up, you know, said time out to everybody and went and talked to the conductor and or to the composer and said, that's as much as we can do on that because everybody's voices are fried now. We're going to have to take a break and let everybody's voice relax before we try doing something else, because that was just, you know, everybody was kind of sounding like this after they got done, because it was awful. And yeah, so there are times where you get as much done as you can, you know, especially with the crazy time schedules that they have with these types of things. If you get even half of it done, they'll be happy. And then the rest of it, they will use like AI voices and record movement.
Yeah, and some of the contemporary composers, yeah, they're writing for effect, so they're not always writing for, like, as in the old days, Mozart or
Yes.
Puccini or somebody might have written, you know, with the voice in mind, but now it's with the effect in mind. So, you know, the poor singer just has to deal with it.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of the recordings now, the orchestra is pre-recorded, right? And you
Right.
go into a booth,
Yep.
and which is nice because then they can go back and replay and you can recut. Yeah. So that makes a difference.
It is.
Is there anything on the horizon? I'm sure there is, that we should look forward to either seeing you or hearing you at?
I've got, supposedly there's a gig somewhere in Michigan. I will be sort of mysterious about it because I haven't signed the contract yet, that is coming up next year, and other things along the way that are also still in progress, because the way things are now, everybody wanted to get back to performing live ASAP, but of course with all of these COVID variants floating around, that's still, everything is literally up in the air, both time-wise and safety-wise. So I don't know.
Have you done some virtual performances with
Yes,
all
I
this going
have,
on?
and they're strange, but you know, right now that's the way things are being done. So you just have to go with it. I
It's
did have a recording session about a week ago that was actually live in person. We were doing everything. Everybody was all vaccinated, but just to be on the safe side, everybody was wearing masks. So it was a little bizarre, but it was interesting being back in a big room using all the microphones and recording technical stuff, and having a recording engineer go when it was time,
yeah, what a concept.
Yeah.
But no, you weren't wearing the masks when you recorded. You had to remove them, or?
No, we were wearing them when we sang. The microphones were all of those, like I call them, the $30,000 German microphones that can hear your nose hairs wiggle.
Yeah, I
So
used to say you can.
everything was very well picked up. I have no doubt of that.
Yeah, I used to say you can hear your hair growing on those microphones.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to move. You just stand still.
You see those and you're going, okay, this is going to be serious, because those are the top of the line microphones.
Yeah, interesting. The way things are having to change now.
Yeah.
You also recently mentioned something that it's so cute, because you've worked with so many professionals, I mean, so many well-known professionals, and you said one time, Jimmy McCracken, of course you're talking about the great American tenor James McCracken.
James McCracken,
he complimented you. What was that compliment?
That was when I was doing the not the prisoner, but the messenger in Aida, and he and his wife, of course, this is back when they were both the package deal. You hired Jimmy, you got his wife, or vice versa. They were doing both Radames and Amneris, respectively. And I had a wonderful time doing all of the staging with him. We were in an old, unused, former American Legion Hall, because it was the largest building that was available to get all of the crowds in, especially when they were going to rehearse the Aida crowd scenes. And he went off one time and to the kitchen, and all of this horrible crashing noises happened, and because he had opened something and everything fell out, and somebody said, "My God, what was that?" And his wife, with hardly looking up, said, "Oh, it's just Jimmy making himself a cup of coffee." But I finally grew to know him a little bit during that, and so I gathered my courage and asked him what he thought of my voice. And he said, "Well, you've got a very good, very strong voice. You remind me of a young me." And I just went, "Okay, that's
Good enough.
it."
Good enough. Yeah, write that one. Can you use that? I'm a young me. I'm a young James McCracken.
Exactly.
Well, a young anything is good.
He even went off on the conductor and the head of the opera company one night, that his main thing, it turns out, was he was very supportive of young artists up and coming that were in their own communities getting going. And he just, while he was taking his makeup off, because I had come in to say goodnight and congratulate him on the show, and the opera director was there, and he just went off on him going, "Why don't you use more young singers like this guy right here? He's very good and he's in this show, but I'm sure you're not using him as much as he should." And the guy was just kind of sitting there going, yeah, sure, Jimmy.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Fun times in performance.
Oh man.
So lots of stories everyone accumulates.
Exactly.
Well, I look forward to hearing you and hopefully seeing you somewhere perform. Hopefully we'll get back to live performance sometime soon.
Yes.
And we'll encourage everyone to listen carefully for the gorgeous tenor cutting through in the video games and films.
Exactly. Although I just call myself now, I'm a vocalist, because I can sing everything from soprano to bass. So
again, that's your wonderful technique. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing some time, and we'll talk again soon. And that's it for today for Studio Shanks Sundays live at 5. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.